So today we're going to go to a new topic, but before that, I would like to briefly discuss quiz 2 and quiz 3. So let's look at quiz 2. So the first question is very easy. Basically, you're asked to display the number of minutes given number of hours. So this is the number of hours which was initialized to 2. And so I ask you to print number of minutes, okay? And then what is the number of hours? And then what is a solution? Okay, so in this part, it's easy. Number of minutes and number of hours is basically 1 hour is 60 minutes. So it will be 60 times number of hours, right? Now, I want to mention is that some students just hard-coded the value, say 2, and then 2 times 60 is 120. Now, this is, we don't accept this solution because basically we are asking the computer to help us to compute something. What you are doing is that you take the value and you compute it manually yourself. Now, this is not programming, okay? So for us, the advantage of creating a variable to represent a value is that if this value change, say 3, then it will automatically compute for us without us having to change it to 180 by computing ourselves and changing this again, okay? So you only change one value here corresponds to the variable, okay? So it's very important that you know how to use the variable in your code so that when this value change, you can make the corresponding changes by just changing one, the value correspond to this variable, all right? So this is a solution that we did not accept, so please bear in mind. And second question, so I get you this code. I say consider following code. I have x is equals to input, enter an integer, y is equals to input, enter another integer, and then print the sum of the curly bracket, and curly bracket is curly bracket, and then we have a dot format on this string. What does it mean is that this curly bracket is a placeholder that will be replaced by the values represented by the variables after the dot format. So this value will be replaced by the value of variable x. This curly bracket will be replaced by the value of y, and this curly bracket will be replaced by the value of x plus y. And all of these are actually presented here to you. All right. So here, you ask select the correct statement. So the first statement is that if the input of x and y is 2 and 3 respectively, which means the user, when after we execute this code, it will wait for user input and user enter 2 and user enter 3 for the subsequent box. And then it say that the output is the sum of 2 and 3 is 5. Is this correct? Is this statement correct? No, why? Yes, because when you do input, whatever user input is stored as string. So when you store a string, S is a string, value 2, Y is also a string of value 5. So what should be the output? 2 concatenate with 3 as a string will be 23. So B is the correct statement. So this is correct. The first one is incorrect. And if the user input of x is 2.3, will there be an error? So there will be no error. User can type anything here. There is no typecasting here that prevents it to type any floating point number, for example. And here you say that if the user input is 2.3 and y is 3, the output is just concatenate the two strings, 2.3 concatenate with 3. So this is correct as well. And the type of x is string and not int, as we have mentioned. This is correct. And this is not correct. So it's very, it's actually not hard. All you have to understand is that the user input is always stored as string. Now, if I want it to represent an int, what should I do? What do I need to change here? If I want to store as an int rather than the string, what do I need to do? Typecasting good. So I want it to be an integer, for example. So I do int here and not just this part. this part as well. So basically whatever user input is, which is stored as string, it converts into int now, represent integer. Okay, so now x is the value integer 2, y is the value integer 3, then 2 plus 3 as the numbers will be equals to 5. Okay, good. Now let's look at quiz 3 here. Now I didn't see much problem with quiz 3. Most of you get almost perfect score, except the fact that there's one thing. So the question say that you are given a list called quiz. So this name is already given to you. Some of you changed this name or didn't know that you have to use this quiz, the name of this variable here. So again, this is a quiz which is quite different from in the lecture. However, it bears resemblance. So this quiz does not represent a score of quiz 1 of all students. It represents the score of an individual student over all the quiz from 0 to whatever length this is. Okay, so it means that the students quiz 0 score is 5. That exactly same student get quiz 1 score is 2. The exact students also get quiz 2 score 3 and so on. So this quiz now represents the quiz score of all the quiz from quiz 0 to whatever length of this quiz is. Okay. Now I ask you, what is the highest score among all the quizzes? So this is basically operation on list. This is a list. All right. So what kind of function that we can use? Max quiz. That's right. Max quiz. Okay, so it will return, max quiz will return the maximum elements inside this list here. And the quiz with the highest score is, so this is where we look for, I'm looking for what is the index of max quiz. Okay, so what is the index of max quiz? Because the index represents the quiz number. Is it quiz 0? Is it quiz 1? Or is it quiz 2? So if max quiz is say 5, so I'm going to ask what is the index of 5 in this list here? Which index, which position has element 5? Okay, so which position contains max of quiz? All right, so in this case, I will just use quiz dot index. So I'm requesting the index of the value returned by max quiz. And the lowest score will be just the mean of quiz and the quiz with the lower score. So basically everything will be the same. Instead of max, I'm doing mean. And what is the average? So average is equals to the sum of quiz divided by the length of quiz. All right, that's called the average. So in this case, we will just do sum quiz divided by length of the quiz. Length of quiz represents the number of elements in quiz. Okay, so in this case, the number of elements is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11. Okay, now consider the following code. I have last name is equals to input, enter your last name. First name is another user input with the message, enter your first name. And then I have the third line saying that initial is equals to last name square bracket 0 plus last name square bracket 1 plus first name square bracket 0 plus first name square bracket 1. And then in the last line, it says print the initial of your name is the value referred by the variable initial. Now, what does this last name square bracket 0 means? First element of last name, and last name 1 is second element of the last name. Good. And this plus means combine, join, concatenate. Yes. So if the user input last name and first name are Adam and Green respectively, what is the value of initial? A. That's right. So it will be A because it will take first element of last name, second element of last name, which is AD, first element of first name, and second element of first name, which is capital G, and then followed by a small letter R, so it will be ADGR. Okay, now some of you put C. What is C wrong? Yes, so capital A is different from small a. Now suppose the user input last name and first name are Adam, and then first name is just G. What is the value of the initial? Is it AG? Some of you put here. So again, we follow the same computation of initial here. It will take the first two elements, capital A, D, and then it asks to take the first two elements of first name. But is there a second element of G? No, so there will be an error. So the error will be an index error, okay? So there will be an index error. And we try to deal with this case here. If the user enter first name, there is just one character, what should we do differently? Okay, so this is something that we want to deal with using today's topic, which is branching, which is conditional statement. That is, if certain conditions is true. So if a certain condition is true, this condition is basically Boolean expression. We have learned Boolean expression last week exclusively, and Boolean expression will return either true or false. Okay, it say that if this Boolean expression return true, then it will execute the expression inside the if block here. Okay, now if you notice here, again, Python is very case sensitive and it has to have follow a certain structure. So if start with a small I and whatever Boolean expression is, and it ends with a colon. After the colon, you will have an indentation, okay? And this indentation will represent the block. So if this condition is true, whatever expression inside this block that is indented will be executed, okay? If this condition is false, none of these statements here inside the block will be executed. Okay, so here's a flow chart. So essentially, when you write an if statements or conditional statements, we are looking at creating a flow chart for the computer to execute. So if a Boolean expression is true, okay, if B, which is a Boolean expression, return true value, it will go to the S block. This is intended X blocks and execute everything inside the X block. All right, and then go to the next line or exit. Now, if B return false, it will go to the second. It will not execute block X. It will skip anything in the block X and exit. Okay, so let's look at one example here. Say a very simple example. Say I want to create an app. If user type in password that match the password in the database, then write that the password is correct, successfully log in or something like that. So I have a password which is hidden from user, okay? And then I ask user for password. I ask user input was to say input, enter your password, right? Okay, whatever user input is, it will be stored as a string in the variable user underscore input. All right, and then I want to create a program that say that tests whether user input match the password. Okay, so if user input is equal to password, remember here, these two equal sign represent checking whether it's equal. Okay, so this is a Boolean expression checking equality. Okay, and then in my if end of the first line of if statement, I have a colon. Once you have a colon, you press enter, the Colab will automatically do an indentation for you. Okay, as you can see, my next line start with a space before the line. Okay, this indentation is important. It represents the block. Remember the block S that we want to execute only if the Boolean expression return true. So if user input is actually equals to password, then we will print say password correct or password is correct, log in successfully, and so on. Whatever meaningful message that you want to write, okay? And then now, if you continue typing here, it will be still inside the block. But I want my app is such that afterwards I print exit, okay? Print exit. All right, so let's execute this. So here, this part here is inside the block, okay? Which means line 3 will be executed if user is equals to password. Line 3 will not be executed if user input is not equals to password, okay? And regardless whether user input is equals to password, I will print exit because this line 4 here is not part of the if statement. It's outside of the if statement. So it will first execute line 1, asking user for input, and then execute line 2, check whether this is true or false. If this is true, it will execute line 3, okay? And then it will execute line 4. If user input is not equal to password, when it's execute line 2, it will not execute line 3. It will skip line 3, whatever statements inside this block here, and go to the next line, which is line 4, print exit. So here's an example. Say, suppose in the first case, I key in the right password, okay? And because of that, this user input is equal to password return true. It will execute line 3 and say that password is correct, log in successfully, and then it will go to line 4, print exit. All right, now let's check if I key in something that is wrong. Say welcome 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. If I click that, if I type in this welcome 1, 2, 3, 4, which is different from password. Password is welcome. User input is welcome 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is checking equality will return false. They are not equal. In this case, it will not execute line 3. It will go to line 4. It will print exit. All right. Now, any questions so far? All right. So when user write, so when a programmer writes, okay, eventually we do want the user to just look at this, say what is your password, and then based on user input, we display something. We don't want the user to be able to see this if statement because this is supposed to be a code hidden from the user. And so when the user started, when a programmer start programming, to make it easier, I usually take it out of the code for testing purpose. Okay, so I will take this out, for example, and over here. And then I want to test, for example, a different code. Say in the first case, I do welcome, which is a correct password. And if I execute this, I get password is correct, login successfully. Now let's compare with the another code where print exit now is intended. If you can see here, so now this print statement line 2 and print statement line 3, they are aligned together, they are indented, and they are inside the if black statement now. They are part of the block S that we mentioned. So remember, this is part of the block S. Okay, so what do you think would be output, would be displayed? If user input is equal to password, this will return true, okay, because my password is welcome. And my password is welcome, my user input is also welcome. So they match, so it's equal, and it will execute line 2 and line 3. Okay, it will print password is correct, login successfully, it will print exit. Now, if I key in a different password that is wrong, say welcome 1, 2, 3, 4, okay. And now, if I run this, I get exit, all right? So the first version, I get exit. The second version, I get nothing display. So I want you to understand the difference, okay? For the first part, when the user input is different, all right, it doesn't execute line 2, but line 3 is not part of the if statement, so it will continue to execute. However, in this code here, print exit is part of the if statements, okay? So if this is wrong, if this is false, which is the current case, welcome 1, 2, 3, 4 is not the same as welcome. So if this is wrong, if this is false, the whole block, it will not be executed. And hence there is no print exit here. So I want you to understand the difference between the two, whether it is inside the block or not inside the block, okay? Now, say, just telling the user that this is correct, login successfully. Now, how about the case that if user input is incorrect, we want to also display meaningful messages as well. So for example, I can do similar thing. So if user input is equal to password, you print password is correct, login successfully. If user input is not equal to password, then you want to print, say, password is incorrect. Okay, So try again, for example. All right, so let's run this. So because our input, user input is welcome 1, 2, 3, 4, and password is welcome. So this here is false, so it will not execute line 2. All right, now it's go to line 3 and check whether user input is not equal to password. Now user input is welcome 1, 2, 3, 4, and password is welcome. And they are indeed not equal, so this will be true statement. Okay, when this return true, it will execute line 4 and say that password is incorrect. Try again. And then it will go to line 5 to print exit because this line is the subsequent code that is outside the if statement. Okay, now if you look at this code here, it executes 2 if. One if here, followed by another if. Now this, as a programmer, you always think, is it really necessary? Okay, so is it necessary? So in the above code, 2 if statements are executed. Okay, so suppose we consider the case that user input is different from password. Okay, so line 1, the Boolean expression line 1, user input equal password will return false. Okay, because they are different, the checking whether they are checking equality will return false because they are not the same. Okay, so if the user input is equals password return false. Okay, so in this case, after executing line 1, okay, so we already know that user input is different from password. So it becomes unnecessary to do another test. Checking whether user is not equal to password, because after executing the first Boolean expression, we already know that whether it's equals or not. Remember, this password is hidden, okay? So you actually don't know, the user have to type in something and hopefully it will match the password, okay? So when you do the first test, user input equal to password, if it's returned true, we know that we already get the right password. If it's returned false, we know that it's already incorrect. It doesn't match. Then it's not necessary to try to execute or test whether they are not equal, because after the first test of the Boolean expression, you already have an answer whether it's true or false. It's completely redundant to check again whether they are not equal. Okay, so this is something that we don't want to compute unnecessarily Boolean expressions because we already know the answer the first time we execute this. All right, so again, we will try to find, as a programmer, we always try a way to optimize our code in a sense that we don't want to do unnecessary tests. Now, all these codes are created by humans. So such a scenario happens quite a lot. So we create, the developer create a different way of writing where to fit that scenario, where if a certain condition is true, if condition is true, then it will execute block X. Okay, so remember they are all intended here. Else, that means if it's not true, it will not execute block S, but it will execute another block, which is block T. Okay, so the flow chart will be like this. So you start off with checking the Boolean expression. If the expressions return true, you execute block S, and then you exit. If the expression return false, it will execute block T instead, and then go exit. All right, so this kind of statement is called if-else statement. If B, then you execute S, else you execute T. All right, so let's try to do this for our code here, if-else. So we have here, and I use if-else. So here, if user input is equal to password, I do print password is correct, login successfully. If we this is completely unnecessary, whether it's true. If it's true, I know I'm going to execute this. If this is false, then I know I'm going to execute this code. So this, I will replace it with an else statement. I don't do any test anymore, okay? Because the results from this Boolean expression already indicate whether I will execute this or I will execute this. So let's check. So if user input is actually not equal to password, it will print password is incorrect. Try again. Now, if I key in a different input that is correct, for example, say welcome, okay? And if I execute it, I get password is correct, log in successfully. So this is called if-else statement, right? Now, an extension, for example, so this works if these Boolean expressions have only two possibilities, okay? True or false. All right, so what if we are in a scenario such as this? So suppose we created, suppose your grade, your quiz score has the following letter grade. Okay, so we start simple. So if quiz score is 1, so quiz score of 5 is A. Okay, so letter score correspond to 5 is A. If quiz score of 4 is B, and quiz score of 3 is C. Okay, now ask user to input the quiz score and display the letter grade. All right, of course, so we have 3 different conditions here. If it's 5, it's A. If it's 4, it's B. If it's 3, it's C. All right, so this is, we're gonna use what we have learned, okay? So here, for example, quiz score is equals to user input. Equals to input, enter your score as digit, all right? Good, say 5 for now, all right? And then whatever user input is, I'm gonna test, or I'm gonna create a program to display the letter grade. So if quiz score is equals to 5, then we're gonna print letter, you get A, okay? You get A, for example. Okay. Now, else, we have 2 different options here. Whether quiz score can be 4, quiz score can be 3. Okay, if it's 4, I'm gonna have to display B. If it is 3, I'm gonna have to display C. Okay, so there are two options, two possibilities here. So what should I do if I have 2 possibilities? I'm going to, for example, write another if statement. Else, if quiz score is equals to 4, I'm gonna print you get B. Okay. If it's not, then you get print, you get C. So I'm gonna make an assumption. Assume user enter input correctly. And that quiz score can only have values 5, 4, and 3. Okay. All right. So this is an if statement inside an if statement. This is called a nested if. Okay. So this is called nested if. So if statement inside another if statement. Okay. So we say that if quiz score equals to 5, you print, you get A. If it's not equals to 5, you have 2 possibilities. Either it's 4 or either it's 3. Okay. If it's 4, you say you get B. Else, then it has to be 3 because we make the assumption that it has to be one of these values, 5, 4, and 3. Then print, you get C. Now, when I run this statement, there will be there will be some error, but this error is not shown as an error, and I want you to figure it out why. So suppose user enter 5 here, and when I execute it, it say that I get C. So what's wrong with this code? So according to my if statement is that if quiz score is equals to 5, which is 5 that I enter here, and it should print you get A. Why is it say you get C? What could be the issue? Sorry? So what is the value of quiz score? So let's do what is quiz score, okay? So quiz score is what? It's a string. It's a string of value 5. Is it equals to the integer 5? It's not, okay? This is a typical error the users, students always make, is that quiz score, which is a user input, is of type string. And string, so you are trying to compare string, is it equals to 5? And obviously this is false, okay? A string is different from an int, all right? So quiz score is when we do this Boolean expression, checking whether quiz score is equals to 5, it returns false because quiz score was stored as string. So it's a string with the character 5. It's not the same as the value 5 itself. So it will not print you get A, okay? So if it's not true, if this expression is not true, it will execute this if statement here. Now this if statement will ask whether it is equals to 4, because our quiz score is a string character 5 is not equals to 4, it will not execute line 5. It will go to the else statement and just execute you get C. Okay, does it make sense? So the above code is incorrect because user input is of type string. All right, so what can we do to change this? Many options. Option 1, change this to typecasting to int. All right, and then use the same code. And then when we run it, enter your score, say 5, is you get A, correct. Okay, another option, again, every programmer thinks differently. Another way is that instead of typecasting quiz score, okay, you can, when you do the equality, you can type it as string. Okay, instead of compare it as an integer, you compare it as a string. And again, if you type 5, you get the correct answer. Okay, 2 versions is up to you how you want to formulate your code. Okay, now the version here, for example, where you do typecasting immediately. So this is the version that you need to be careful of. We make the assumption that user display, we make the assumption that the user enter input correctly, that is always entered as a digit. Okay, so there is no issue when we do typecasting. But in the event the user did not do that, okay? So here, in the event user did not type in digit, okay? So did they ask, we're gonna test it, what happened? Is that say I type in, I don't know, 5.1, okay? I will get a value error because 5.1 cannot be typecast into int, all right? So this is where you need to be careful whether you want it to be an int or not. Int really depends on your applications, okay? So if you make the assumption that they will always type in digit, okay, then it's definitely fine to do typecasting. If there is a chance that the user won't enter as a digit, you don't want the system to crash, okay? You don't want the system to crash. Instead, you want to tell the user that, hey, your input is incorrect, all right? So then we're gonna come to this later on. Now, if you look at this code here, nested if, it's pretty messy in one sense. So you have if statement in under the if statement. And in Python, there is another way to make it more elegant. It's called the if-else statement. It's basically the same or similar with the nested if, but it's sort of formulated in a way that is more concise and easy to understand without many if-else conditions. All right, so the idea of if-else is this. So we check a condition B. If condition B is true, if it's true, it will execute block S. So this is my block S. If it's not true, if you return false, all right, then there are other possibilities. In this case, say there are two possibilities. You're gonna execute condition C, you're gonna test another condition called condition C. If this is true, you're gonna execute T. If it is false, you're gonna execute U. So you have two conditions here. If this is true, you're gonna execute this. If this is not true, your next test is condition C. Okay. If condition C is true, you're gonna execute T, all these statements here in block T. Otherwise, if condition C is false, you're gonna execute condition U. So note that you only, when you have a condition that is true, you stop testing. If condition B is true, you only execute S and you exit. You don't test condition C anymore, okay? So here's our code using if-else in an easier version, okay? In an if-else statement, right? So here, for example, quiz score equals to this, and we make the assumption that so assume user enter right input. All right, so I have here. Now instead of else here, I'm going to change it to else if. Okay. So we first test whether it's equals to 5. It is equal to 5, you will print you get A. And then you don't test quiz score equals to 4 anymore. You immediately exit. So we can print exit. All right. Else, if this is false, you're going to do the subsequent test, whether it's equals to 4. If this is equals to 4, you print you get B. And lastly, if quiz score is not equals to 4, you're going to print else statement, print you get C. So here's an example. I execute it, I type 5, and I get this. All right, if I type a different value, say B now. So when I type B, sorry, I should type 4. If I get type 4, I get B, exit. And then if I type 3, you get C, exit as well. Okay, now I have 3 statements. If you compare this here, it's actually the output will be the same as this, but it's more concise. Here we have if and then another if. Here I have more concise form if, else here. Okay, good. Now let's do one step further. So if else statement, these are very common. It's something that in your code you will write many times. So it's very important that you understand fully how to construct this code here. Now let's look at another statement here, another example. So suppose now the quiz score is just not 5, 4, 3, okay? It can be 5, 4, 3, 2, or 1, or 0, okay? And the letter grade is based on which range you are in. So say if quiz score is 4 or 5, it's between 4 to 5 inclusive. So sometimes we minus 0.5 marks, so we don't want to deal with just integer. So anything between 4 to 5 inclusive of 4 and 5. So you get 8. Okay. So if quiz score is say between 2 to 3, 2 to 4. Let me be more precise. If the quiz score is at least 4, then you get A. If the quiz score is at least 2, you get B. If point score is less than 2, you get C. Okay. Now we are dealing with a Boolean expression that's not just checking equality, but we are checking a range here, whether it's a comparison, okay? So we're gonna do here. So we're gonna modify the code to satisfy these three conditions to display it, okay? So again, we have quiz score equals to int. I represent it as an int. I assume user, so assume user enter correct input. We will deal with the case where user don't enter correct input later on. So say now first step, if quiz score is equals to 5, you get A. But our modification is that if it's at least 4, you get A. So what should I change here? Instead of equal, it should be become greater equal. Greater equals to 4. If it's greater equals to 4, you get an A. So next, so I'm gonna give you a different version first. If quiz score, if I follow the follow these instructions directly, so students often do that, and so what we're gonna get is quiz score is at least 2. Okay. But less than 4, you get B. Okay. So if quiz score is at least 2, so greater equals to 2, and quiz score is less than 4, then you print, you get B. Okay, this is literally translate the instructions into code. Okay, and then if quiz score is less than 2, then you print, you get C. Okay. So, okay, all seems good. We're typecasting it, we compare it with the integer after we typecast because now quiz score is in, and we do exactly what the question asks for. If it is greater equals to 4, I will print, you get A. If it is greater equals to 2 and less than 4, you get B. If it is less than 2, you get C. So everything is followed as what is instructed in the questions. So if I type in something like 4, I get A. If I type in something like 3.3, okay, I get B. And I'm going to change it to float now because I'm going to test floating point numbers. So 3.5, I get B as well because it's greater equals to 2 but less than 4, so you get B. If I type anything less than 2, so if I type 2, I still get B because it's greater equals to 2 is true. And if I type, say 1.5, you get C. All seems correct. Everything is fine. Now, however, I want as a programmer, you always think you have 3 if statements here. 1, 2, 3. Okay. What does it mean is that you test this, and then you test this, and then you test this. All right, 3 times. Okay. Even though, for example, your quiz score is 5. In the first statement, quiz score greater equals to 4 will return true. I'm going to write down. So if quiz score is 5, okay. Line 2, test quiz score, test whether 5 is greater equals to 4, okay. 5 because quiz score is 5, so quiz score is test whether 5 is greater equals to 4, okay. In this case, this is true, and you print, you display. So print A. All right. Now, because this is not an if-else statement. So you go to the next line, which is line 4. It will continue to execute line 4 and check whether 5 is greater equals to 2. And if it is, and whether 5 is less than 4. Okay, in this case, this is false because 5 is not less than 4 and 5 is not greater or even though 5 is greater equals to 2, but 5 is not less than 4. Okay, so this is false and false, which return false. Okay, 5 is greater equals to 2, which is true. Sorry, 5 is greater equals to 2, so this is true. Okay, so 5 is greater or equals to 2, so this is true. And whether 5 is less than 4, 5 is not less than 4, so it's false. True and false, you return false. So the whole expression here will be false, so you do not print you get B. And then you continue to execute line 6. Okay, and check whether score is less than 2. Okay, so again, quiz score is 5. Whether 5 is less than 2, is 5 less than 2? It's false, so you will not print anything. Okay, but you can see here, the moment we do line 2, test whether 5 is greater equals to 4, we already know that it is greater equals to 4. We don't have to test 4. We don't have to test line 6. So these are redundant. Redundant tests, they are unnecessary. So instead, when you read the question like this, you need to formulate it so that you don't do unnecessary tests. So one thing, instead, I will do else if statement. Okay, and so here, I'm going to change it. I'm going to do else. Okay, so here in this version, as long as you hit one condition that is true, it will stop testing subsequent tests. Okay, so for example, if our quiz score is 5, all right, and it say that 5 is greater or equals to 4, which is already true. This is true, so it's gonna print you get A. And then it will go to print exit any subsequent lines. It will not continue to do this test here. It will not print this as well. It will, the moment you hit a condition that will be true, you do execute the block correspond to that condition, and then you out of the if statements immediately. Okay, so here, for example, if I do 5, okay, you will immediately say you get A and exit. All right, so if it's not equals to, if it is less than 4, say 3. Okay, so this will be false. 3 is not greater or equals to 4, so it will not execute this. The next thing it will execute is line 4, else if statement. So this is true because 3 is greater than equals to 2 and 3 is less than 4. So true and true is true, so it will print you get B. And then it will go to line 8 to print exit. It will not execute 7 anymore, line 7. Okay, so here's the idea. Now, again, this is not ideal yet. I want you to think, are all of these conditions here truly necessary? In particular, you have quiz score greater or equals to 4. You already know something about quiz score. Do I really need these Boolean expressions here? Do I need to take 2 Boolean expressions joined by n? So this is something for you to think about and for us to continue on Wednesday. Thank you.